The Huns were originally from a tribe of Mongolians from Central Asia. They became an enemy and threat to the German tribes. In many cases, the Germanic tribes crossed into the Roman territory to flee from the Huns and seek areas of safety and civilization. Many ancient historical records from the first centuries AD refer to hordes of barbarians invading and conquering lands to their south, east, and west. The description of their fierceness, their skill on the battlefield, their cruelty, and their lack of cultural refinement is widespread. Most of the people who wrote these descriptions were not eyewitnesses, however. For many, the information was second-hand at best. In addition, fear of the invaders was so intense that it influenced all of these writers, whether they reported on the invaders' military activities or their customs in general. More importantly, the nomads had no formal written language, so the histories written about them were penned by their enemies. In recent decades, historians have begun reanalyzing artifacts from this period and all other sources of information. As a result, a clearer, less biased account of these people is emerging. The term Hun is generally used to refer to the peoples of Central Asia who began to invade China, India, Persia, and the Roman Empire in great numbers between the 3rd century BCE and the 6th century CE. Although historians have not yet found conclusive proof that all of these invaders had the same roots, history has classified them collectively as the Huns. We do know that these tribes shared several characteristics. They were semi-nomadic peoples, meaning that they did not travel constantly or to consistently different locations, but seem to have kept the same summer and winter quarters. Their houses, called yurts, were large tent-like structures that were easily assembled and disassembled. Excavations show that they raised some crops, including grain, but there is no evidence that they practiced farming on an extensive scale. Rather, they were herders, and their nomadic life grew out of their need to pasture their horses, cattle, and sheep. For centuries prior to 300 BCE, Hunnic tribes traveled the plains, plateaus, grasslands, and semi-deserts of the Eurasian steppe, an area from western Russia to the Sea of Okhotsk, off the coast of China. Although the vastness of the area hindered the unification of all the Hunnic tribes, whenever groups did band together, they formed a strong fighting force. The Hunnic tribes' use of the horse was responsible for their superiority in warfare. According to ancient writers, the Huns were expert riders. Their horses were short and shaggy, but extremely rugged and capable of enduring heat and cold without shelter. Some accounts attribute the invention of both the saddle and the stirrup to the Huns, but this has yet to be proven. Whether at peace or at war, these tribesmen spent most of their time on horseback. In battle, the Huns' most fearsome weapon was the reflexed composite bow, which could shoot an arrow up to 180 feet with deadly accuracy, and was very effective up to 600 feet. Made of wood, sinew, and horn, a well-made bow required 5 to 10 years of expert craftsmanship to season and to tune it properly. Hunnic warriors and their families treasured their bows, which were not buried with warriors, but were passed down with helmets and armor from generation to generation. For this reason, very few weapons and little military equipment have been found in excavated Hunnic tombs. Control of a Hunnic tribe rested with the king of the tribe and the nobles who aided and advised him. Any individual who exhibited exceptional leadership qualities could be formally invited to join the noble class. The Huns owned slaves, but their nomadic lifestyle made keeping slaves difficult. For this reason, slaves were often freed, ransomed, or married into the family that owned them. Attila was the most famous Hunnic leader. He is known as a destroyer rather than a builder of civilizations. He was so fierce, he was named the Scourge of God. He led the Huns in many assaults, attacking both the Eastern and Western Roman Empire. The Emperor of the East paid Attila to keep the Huns from attacking. When he could not keep up the payments, Attila invaded. Likewise, Attila devastated the western half of the Roman Empire. Pope Leo had to pay money to save Rome from total attack. While Hunnic society was patriarchal and leaders and warriors were men, women were respected and given considerable responsibility. Since the men spent much of their time at war, the women had to be prepared to defend the territory and possessions left under their protection. Girls learned at a young age to ride horses and handle weapons. The law permitted polygamy, the practice of having more than one wife. But since a man had to purchase his wife from her father, polygamy was expensive and practiced only by the very rich. The Huns had a close relationship to and dependence on nature. They worshipped the divine spirits that govern nature and believed that they could learn the will of the spirits by listening to special seers or priests who had the power to communicate with the spirits. The seers first sacrificed animals, then read their organs and bone marks, as well as the cracks made in bones that had been fired. Hunnic shamans or chief priests also presided over funeral rites, during which mourners tore their garments, cut their hair, and gouged and slashed their cheeks. Unfortunately, since the Huns left few records, it is difficult to know for certain which languages they spoke, what they looked like, which customs they practiced, and what their origins were. There were many Hunnic tribes, and each tribe had its own particular characteristics and customs. To classify them all as uncivilized and barbaric is unjust. They did invade and destroy, but some historians argue that they did so out of necessity. For example, in ancient China, pillage was often the only way of gaining access to Chinese products, because the government had outlawed legitimate trade.